Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of FTF Marketplace, brought to you by myself, Tony Sharkey, and with Pete O'Rourke, our football insider. Last 36, 24 hours of a very quiet transfer window. We're going to be discussing that today. We've got a few more clubs to discuss, a few more interesting topics to cover. Pete, how are you? You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good, Tony. Just doing the rounds, trying to find out if there is any late deals to be happening in this window, but it doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of money spent. I don't think there's going to be too much panic buying going on from Premier League clubs right now. I've seen it in the past, but I just think everybody's running scared of PSR rules and FFP. So yeah, don't envisage too many new faces, but I'm sure there'll be a bit of movement in and out at some clubs. Probably the clubs down near the wrong end of the table right now.
Yeah, I mean, we decided to put some webinars on in the worst transfer window, the worst January transfer window we've ever seen, but there is plenty to talk about. And as you guys can probably see, we've got three fantastic guests from goalkeeper.com. Brendan, how are you?
Doing well, Tony. Thanks for having us
You
on.
good? We've got John Harrison. John, how are you? You okay?
Yeah, great. Yeah, really good. Thank you.
And many of you will know Brad Friedel. Brad, how are you?
Very good, Tony. How you doing?
Yeah, really good. So what we're going to do is we'll start with the guys from goalkeeper.com. Brendan, would you just like to let our audience know a little bit about what you're up to?
Absolutely. For the past few years, goalkeeper.com has been studying the goalkeeper space, trying to see what's been happening. And one of the areas we've found is that goalkeeper evaluation, goalkeeper performance, no goalkeeper coaches were trusting any current stats providers or systems, anything like that. And then in a fortuitous way, met John Harrison, who, well, we'll hear from in a second. And he's a Cambridge Astrophysics PhD and goalkeeper. And I remember my first call with him. I remember getting off of that call right away and then calling my partner and being like, we need him. I want him. We can do something really special here. And we're entering our second year of business now. So this transfer window, we've been quietly ticking away behind the scenes with some of our partners, mostly agencies, couple clubs. And then we also did our kind of first appearance in the US market, which went really well. John and I spoke over there, mostly John. But then we are doing some interesting things, and Brad joined forces as well. And yeah, it should be a really interesting second year of business as we start to really help our clubs with some interesting things from the goalkeeper side.
So you were leading on the data side of goalkeeping, and I'm going to say, forgive this really corny joke, but it's not rocket science, is it, John?
Indeed, it's not rocket science. Even though I do obviously like rocket science and planetary science, I also do love goalkeeping, and that's exactly one of the crossovers that we'll probably get into later on.
Yeah, and so your role in goalkeeper.com.
Yeah, so I'm the head of data science, and I do a lot of the work on building and preparing the models. And then, yeah, as Brendan sort of alluded to and mentioned, we're sort of multifaceted at the moment. So we do use it to help clubs make transfers and help our partners and agents sort of evaluate goalkeepers, check their basically their capabilities and also their suitability to the various clubs. Because obviously we now know, and it's a big part of modern goalkeeping, that some clubs want a very specific type of goalkeeper, and that definitely won't fit another club. They all want something. They might want shot stopper and a cross claimer, or they might want a sweeper and a distributor, or some sort of combination of the areas of goalkeeping. So that's what we're big on, the stats and digging into that and making sure that the goalkeeper has the best chance of fitting into the squad and performing as well as possible to help that team progress up the league.
So it's very bespoke then. It's club to club have their own sort of nuances, their own wants and likes in terms of a keeper. Is there that much variation, or are you finding that everyone wants a keeper who can play out from the back, or there's many clubs that do?
So yeah, everyone wants a keeper who can do everything, ideally. And there's like a handful of those in the world, right? You're talking your Alissons, your Emi Martinez, those sort of guys. Someone who can literally every aspect of goalkeeping. They're above average. They're a top performer. But, and I think this is what Brendan alluded to at the start, what we're trying to do is look at, well, if you're a club who actually faces very few headers or crosses, like it doesn't really matter if you've got an amazing cross claimer. So you can probably go into the market and find a guy who's a great shot stopper. Maybe he's really weak at crosses, but actually it won't affect you. So if you can buy him for a couple of £1 million and get the value of £10 million out of him, that's a great deal for you. So obviously, yeah, every club would want the £100 million guy who ticks every box. But actually where we're trying to help clubs is find the sort of gems that would work for them in a bespoke way, like you mentioned, Tony.
And bringing you in, Brad, with all your experience, all those different clubs that you've been at, and how are you finding working with these two guys?
Well, Brendan, I've never been in a room really with an astrophysicist in the way that John sees goalkeeping. It's very interesting. But what I would say is this: is also being a manager in MLS, also working with the federation, the data for outfield players is very good, and it continues to build. The data for goalkeeping until now has been very poor. Most companies, I believe all of them, couldn't really differentiate between a shot that is 35 yards out at 12 miles per hour as opposed to Harry Kane striking one at you from 7 yards out at 62 miles an hour. So basically what John, Brendan, James and the group have been able to do is break down every single action that a goalkeeper is involved in with regards to handling, shot stopping, cross claiming, distribution, and sweeping. And now you can, if you're a club, goalkeeping coach, you're the goalkeeper yourself, you can build on your successes and you can build on your weaknesses. But we can save clubs a lot of money. In the transfer market, we can also help clubs claim a lot of rewards with regards to sponsorship, place placement in the league based on the goalkeeper that they get. And when John sits down and puts the facts in front of you, if you have a weak goalkeeper, you are not in the top 6 in the league. It happens almost in no league across Europe or in MLS.
Sorry, Brad. So you're saying to get into the top 6, you need that key position of goalkeeper. You need the right goalkeeper, one of the top goalkeepers to get in the top 6 even.
Well, yes, you need the goal difference. Basically, the algorithms and that are set up is the teams that get a certain amount of points and have a certain goal difference. You actually, let me revert a little bit. You could tell John the goal difference of a team, and he can give you within, what is it, John? 99%.
It's like I think it's like 95% odd.
95% accuracy of what place they are in the league.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
That's
so obviously
really
sometimes there's like outliers, but basically the goal difference of a team really dictates how well they do. And as Brad was saying there, a goalkeeper faces every single shot on target you concede. So like they're the only real position that is like a single point of failure. So what ends up happening, and when we've looked at the mathematics of the situation, like a goalkeeper, if they're really good, can save you a lot of goals because they literally face every shot your team concedes. Whereas like a star player, so a Harry Kane, a Lionel Messi, they take about 35% of a team's shots. So obviously they do have a big impact, but if the goalkeeper's not there, it can cause big issues. And one stat I sort of like to say is in our model, the bottom 3 keepers in the Premier League last year were all the 3 keepers of relegated clubs, and all of them were sort of dropped at the end. So Bazunu, Danny Ward, and Meslier, they were all dropped at the end for the final 5 games and replaced with like just the number 2. They didn't really have anyone in place that could bring that level up. And that is like a sort of common theme in if your goalkeeper's performing badly, it can really drag your team down. Even if you're a Leicester and on paper, the rest of your team is definitely good enough to stay up, it can cause big problems.
Yeah, I'm just going to throw an example. Jordan Henderson for Sunderland. I sort of had and it's just a rough rule of thumb. You know, it's probably not statistically correct. But sometimes when you're at the bottom of the league and the keeper's facing more shots and more actions, he's getting busier, and you do quite well, it catches the eye of teams higher up. Is that not the case? The Jordan Pickford example, Sunderland, you know, he was probably saving 6 or 7, but letting 2 or 3. But do you know what I mean?
No, so exactly. That's why having the sort of older stats that Brad was talking about isn't a great metric for looking at that, because like you say, his save percentage or his whatever could be off the scale and really good. But actually, like you say, he's at a team near the bottom of the league. Maybe they're conceding 5 or 6 shots from outside the box every game that you'd expect an average goalkeeper to save. So the way we've built all our models, as Brad said, it's all about goal probability. So what's the probability of it going in before an action and after action? And then that allows us to find that actually some of those goalkeepers near the bottom that I guess get praise on Match of the Day or whatever and look like they're playing out their skin every week.
Yeah.
Actually, sometimes they are a top guy and then they're going to get snapped up by a big club. So like Aaron Ramsdale or whatever, you can play well at clubs conceding a lot of goals and then get seen and then do it at a higher level. But a lot of the time, like you were sort of alluding to there, it's actually just a case of, well, they've made a lot of good saves, but they've also let in a lot of bad goals. And because they play for a small club, it's not getting noticed as well. And the basic stats don't actually bring that out. You need to look at a deeper level to really find that.
And you mentioned Aaron Ramsdale there. Where are you on the Ramsdale Rare sort of stats debate?
So
I found it really interesting. You know, I had a goalkeeper at Brentford who was number 2 to Rare, and that doesn't make him a bad goalkeeper. It makes him a really good goalkeeper. And I was really shocked when it sort of all went and Rare went into Arsenal.
Yeah, so we've got a nice article actually on goalkeeper.com all about that, digging into
I didn't know that. That wasn't me.
So people can go and check that out if
it's a great link. It's a great link.
But but basically, yes, our sort of opinion on it is it's a really difficult one for a goalkeeper because we had both of those guys as being top goalkeepers. I think Ramsdale was maybe like the 7th best in the Prem last year, but Raya was 3rd best. So it's like it was sort of like it would have been a marginal gain, but I'm sure Brad can get into the psychology of all this a lot better than me. If you're playing as the 3rd best and the 7th best at different clubs, that with a number 2 behind you who you know is steady and you know won't take your place, whatever, it's very different for Raya now trying to perform as the 3rd best goalkeeper in the league when every day he's training 7th best and might be potentially worried about what's going to happen there. So I think it's a very interesting experiment for us guys at goalkeeper.com because like Brendan said, we want to ask all the questions and figure out what's going on because we're like, okay, on paper, this is the placement and Arteta's probably right that if he wanted to win the league, maybe he pushes the goalkeeper from like a top 6 goalkeeper to a top 2 or 3, but actually can a goalkeeper department perform well with 2 such exceptional goalkeepers in
Brad, I watched a lot of Blackburn because I had a player there that we mentioned, Zurab Kizanishvili, and I used to watch a lot of, Blackburn, and you must have been on one of the top keepers in the Premier League, particularly for that Blackburn period. Who was the number 2 there? I can't really remember behind you.
Well, when I first signed, it was Alan Kelly and John Filan, and Alan Miller. Then Pete Inkelman and Richard Lee. Richard Lee came in.
Yes.
And then Jason Brown came in as well for a little while.
Wow. So, but did you feel that? So the number 1 and I, I've looked after a goalkeeper throughout his career, and sometimes you're number 1. I mean, you were number 1 all the time, I take it, but it's very much a ranking system, isn't it? It's not like the outfield position. Everyone knows the sort of pecking order of goalkeepers.
I don't agree with the 2 out and out number 1 scenario. I think you have a number 1, and then you as a coaching staff need to decide if they're self-motivated type or if you need to motivate them, but that's your coaching skill as the number 1. And if you have a real solid long-term number 1, then I think you should get an experienced number 2, and then really concentrate on your youth policy and try to find that next real top youth goalkeeper and have them go out on loans and come back and see and try to time it that they're ready when that number 1 goes. But that's a way also to maximize your transfer market values as well.
Yeah. I'm going to bring Pete in here. We talk about transfer market values. There's been very few goalkeeper moves, Pete, this window.
Yeah, not a lot, but there could be one in the next 24 hours. It'd be interesting to get Brad's take on it, actually. Nottingham Forest are in the market for another goalkeeper. Obviously, US keeper Matt Turner's in there as number one at the minute. He's coming for a bit of flack recently, Brad, for some games he made a mistake against Manchester United. Also was beaten at his near post last night in that Arsenal game as well. They're looking at Jack Butland and also Peter Gulatsky at RB Leipzig. What would you guys be advising Nottingham Forest if they were looking at a goalkeeper right now?
Is that aimed to me or?
Yeah, can do, Brad. Yeah, yeah.
What
Well,
you want to go, Brendan? I mean,
I'll
Yeah.
take the first nibble. So when we work with clubs, we advise them. We do an interesting thing for them. We do something we call a goalkeeper suitability index. And what that does is really it's an internal look at the club and all the chances that they concede. And then we can use that information to look at the market and then advise that club specifically on every single goalkeeper there. Now, it does a couple things for us. We can look at a goal value for that player. And we can look at, if you bring on this player, we predict these areas he'll be weak based on all the chances you concede. And then you can help acclimate that goalkeeper as they come in. I don't think John mentioned this earlier, but our math does show every goal in the Prem, either above or below kind of baseline, is worth £2.6 million. So that's a fun
2.6 million. 2.6 million for the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Wow.
No
pressure, guys. No pressure.
Yeah. As we look at bringing in the goalkeeper, financial impact can be definite. John can talk about the kind of up in the upper quadrant and lower quadrant of that scale, but then back on the Forest issue here, I'll pass that one back to Brad for some commentary as the manager coming in and everything there.
Well, I know Matt really well. I actually gave him his professional debut at New England Revolution, and Matt is a top shot stopper. And I know I watched the game last night as well. And he made an error at the near post, and has made a few errors. What I would say is, when you're a goalkeeper and you're a number one at a club, sort of advice, like don't sign as a number two somewhere, which is what he did at Arsenal. So if we go back, I think, he wanted to get into the Premiership, but he was going as a number two. The transfer fee suggested it, his salary suggested it. And I think it's really difficult when you're the number one. You want to get momentum in the professional game, but then you find yourself playing behind a great goalkeeper as Ramsdale is. And now, ironically, Ramsdale finds himself in the same position this year as Raya has gone in. The move to Forest, again, I think he went in knowing he was going to be possibly a number two, as they were looking at another goalkeeper. I can't say who at this moment in time to even go in. So he knew that maybe he wasn't the out and out number one that they wanted. And I think it's very difficult psychologically. And that's why I think we're starting to hear rumors about them wanting another goalkeeper. Obviously, a new manager has gone in, and a new manager might want to replace many positions. That's what a lot of managers might want to do to fit their style of play. Listen, Matt is good enough to be a number one somewhere. He really is. He's a super kid. He's a hard worker. He's a great teammate, and he's a phenomenal shot stopping goalkeeper. He's worked really hard to develop his footwork over the years. He started late in the game, but I think he has to go somewhere where he is the out and out number one. And I understand why they're looking for another goalkeeper. I get it. It's a professional game. You make mistakes, people are going to look at it. But for anyone listening out there, Matt is a very good goalkeeper. He just needs to find that place where he's the number one again.
Thanks, Brad. That's Pete. I saw Ivo Grbic at Sheffield United as well. He had a bit of a rough day for different reasons.
Yeah, obviously he made his debut against Crystal Palace last night. Ended up coming off as well, getting injured in that game, which is not the best way to make your debut. And obviously Sheffield United went on to lose that game as well. as like Brad was saying, it's hard. Wes Fodringham's been the #1 goalkeeper there, helped them get promotion. Obviously, Sheffield United are struggling at the wrong end of the table, conceding lots of goals. I think they've got the worst record in the Premier League this season. But now he's lost his place in the team and he's out of contract in the summer, so he could be looking for a whole new club come the summer as well. So, but as the guy said, goalkeeper probably for me is the most important position of any team right now. If it's 2.6 million for each save that a goalkeeper's making for teams now, it's a big statistic that obviously the keeper getting the goalkeeper right is vital for any team going forward. You've seen what Liverpool did with Alisson after the mistakes of Loris Karius in that Champions League final. They went out and got Alisson, and they haven't looked back since. And he's gone on to establish himself as one of the best keepers in the world. So I'm expecting you guys probably going to be busy this summer with clubs looking for those keepers who can make the difference.
Listen, guys, just before we wrap this section up, we've got one question from Adam, and Adam asks, and I'm not sure who's going to answer it. Perhaps, Brendan, you can point or you can answer it yourself. Might opposition clubs use the goalkeeper.com platform for their analysis before matches too, i.e. seeing that the opposition goalkeeper is weaker at dealing with crosses, so will adjust their tactics to put more crosses into the box?
Yes.
Who wants to take that?
I'll take that one. Data is information, right? And then where we really focus is the language and building that culture to then generate an on-field performance. We have worked with some of our partners to use our information both as a shield and, in that question, a sword. So the microscope under which goalkeepers are there will change. We're poking it, we're changing it.
Yeah.
But we'll be there to catch them as they're under more and more scrutiny, as always.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Brendan. That's a really good answer. Guys, thank you so much. Just before we wrap up, I want to ask Brad. Brad, we're just going to talk about transfers with Pete for the rest of this session. How many transfers did you have during your playing career, do you reckon? Can you remember how many?
Wow. I went 1 to Liverpool, 2 to Blackburn.
Yeah.
Then
Villa?
3 to Villa, and then it was free to so 3. So I mean, I transferred to Tottenham, of course, but it was a free.
3 or 4 then, yeah. And was any of them done on the last day? Was there any last day panic moves, or were they all just nice and calm and relaxed? Just tell us about if there was one.
No, they were all relaxed. None of them. I mean, the one from Liverpool to Blackburn, that's when the transfer window ended in March. I mean, I transferred there in October, I think, of that year, so that wasn't bad. The one that was a bit, it was a shame, really, but it was a bit up and down, was the Blackburn to Villa. But that was because the Blackburn was also selling the trust. The Walker Trust was selling the club.
Yes,
and it was, I had such a great. I mean, you were around. You mentioned it earlier. What a great club! It really was one of the best.
John Williams is a great chairman as well. John Williams,
one of the best run clubs in English football.
Yeah,
and back then, Tom Finn and John, they did a great job.
Yeah,
and Robert Core. I just asked them, are we a selling club? And always what I meant by that, if we had sold Andy Cole, there was Dwight York. If Dwight York wasn't there, Roca Santa Cruz. If Santa Cruz wasn't there, Bellamy was there. Matt Jansen was there. We always had goal scorers and top players.
Benny McCarthy as well.
Benny McCarthy, yeah. And they actually told me when a bid from Man City came in and a bid from Aston Villa came in. So Mark Hughes had gone to Man City.
Yeah.
They said, not only are we a selling club, we're selling the club. And it was a bit of a shame because it was 8.5 years, had a great time, was nearing my testimonial. But I mean, history proves it was the right thing to do. But that was the only one that pulled on the heartstrings a bit.
Yeah, I bet. Listen, guys, that's been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. I'd like to invite you along to the Football Transfer Forum, the live event, when that comes back round in April, May time this year. But thanks, Brad. Thanks, John. And thanks Brendan. Cheers now. Cheers, guys.
Pleasure. See you.
Thank you.
Okay, Pete. So let's talk about last day and panic buys. Let's talk about, we've got what, less than 36 hours left. What do you think the last day is going to look like?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as frenetic as previous deadline days. Tony has no doubts about that. Money's tight. Clubs are being a bit more careful this transfer window for sure. You just have to look at the records. I think less than £50 million been spent in the Premier League this year, when it was over 700 or nearly 800 last January. So things have definitely changed in that respect with PSR rules and FFP. So clubs very wary of spending. I think now most of the best run clubs do see the summer transfer window as the main time to do your business. You've got more time to plan and to budget as well for these things. January is only an emergency window, I think, for a lot of clubs now. If there's injuries or looking to offload unhappy players, that's when they will use the January transfer market, unless an option comes up that you can't really turn down and you can get a deal done for somebody, because clubs are struggling financially. So some clubs might have to sell some of their best assets in January, and there'll be other bigger, richer clubs who are able to pay those fees for those players as well. But I think it's just a sign of the times right now that this window has been a lot quieter than most, and I don't see too many panic buys come tomorrow for that 11 p.m. deadline. But I still think there's a few clubs out there who are obviously open for business and looking to do some moves. Fulham would like to do a striker. They're interested in Armando Broja at Chelsea. Wolves would also like to do a striker. And while you've got the clubs down the wrong end, like Sheffield United, desperate to bring in at least one centre-back if they can. And I think, obviously, we know Everton have been in the news for the FFP breaches and everything else, but they would like to bring in a winger if they possibly could as well. So, yeah, there'll be a bit of movement, Tony, but the big change will be a lot of these deals will be loans with options rather than permanent cash deals.
Yeah, it's amazed me the number of loans that have been going on. It seems like, players are even letting, star players go out on loan, get them off the budget, off the wage bill for a bit, without, there's some obligations to buy, there's some with options to buy, and there's a distinct difference in the two, isn't there?
Oh yeah, massively. The selling club would prefer an obligation, while the buying club would just prefer an option. They would say, well, let's get the player in on loan, see how he does, and if he does well, then we'll look at maybe signing him on a permanent basis. Clubs don't want to commit to anything these days, because these loan signings, normally they do happen. It's players at clubs who aren't playing that move and go out on loan. Then if you want to sign them, you don't want to sign them with an obligation in case it doesn't work out. Then you end up having to pay a large transfer fee for these players as well. So I think a lot of clubs have seen over the years where maybe they've gone and done permanent deals for players that just haven't worked out. I look back to, obviously, there've been a few panic buys over the years in the January transfer window. Probably one of the most high profile was Andy Carroll to Liverpool in 2011. After they sold Fernando Torres to Chelsea, Liverpool went out and were desperate for strikers, and they spent 35 million on Andy Carroll, who obviously was a very good player and had done really well for Newcastle, but he was never really fit. Liverpool signed him when he was injured. They were that desperate to bring a striker in, and he never really got off the ground on Merseyside as well. So that's a deal that cost Liverpool a lot of money, as they had to loan him out to West Ham, and then he ended up joining West Ham on a permanent basis for a fraction of what Liverpool paid for. So yeah, clubs are going to do their due diligence right now, and I think that's why you do see a lot of loans with options rather than obligations.
Is he's still playing in France or something? He's got a contract in France, is that right?
Yeah, no, he's playing in Amiens, I think, in France.
Right,
scored a goal near the halfway line, I think, this season when he caught the keeper off his line. So still going.
Oh yes, I did see that goal. Yeah, the one I sort of remember is from the Sunderland Till I Die documentary, and I think they're bringing another. They're after a striker as well, Pete, isn't it? Sunderland.
Yeah. Everybody wants a striker in the windows. Well, obviously they are being linked with Kiefer Moore from Bournemouth. He is somebody that they're interested in. Again, a player, the Premier League, who's on big wages, so that's an issue that Sunderland have to contend with. And Bournemouth right now are unsure of whether to loan out Kiefer Moore, because it would leave them a bit shorter up front, with Dominic Solanke probably their only other out-and-out number 9 striker. So if anything was to happen to them and they let Kiefer Moore go out on loan, they would find themselves pretty short for striking options as well. But yeah, there's a few clubs looking to Kiefer Moore, Sunderland being one, and Ipswich. So as we know, strikers are that rare commodity that everybody wants. So they're probably going to be the ones that most clubs will be looking for between now and deadline. And
if there's any sporting directors watching, that Sunderland Till I Die, that chain of events in that January transfer window, I think it was 2020, something like that. The top scorer at the club was Josh Madger, and they allowed him to leave midway through the January transfer window without having a replacement. And they took the money, I think it was 1.5 million euros or something. But he was their star striker, but he was going to be free in the summer. So they took the money in the mid-January, and then it came to sort of 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on deadline day. And there he is, Stuart Donald, I think it was, throwing $1 million, another million, another million at a Wigan player, Will Grigg. And as we know now, it didn't work out as a great transfer. In fact, it was a panic buy, I'd describe it as. But it sort of just struck me as how definitely not to manage a January transfer window. Are they looking? Are Sunderland looking at Diallo as well? Is that going to? Is that a possibility? Because he was exceptional. He was exceptional in the Championship.
Outstanding for Sunderland last season, was instrumental in helping them get to the playoffs. But obviously he went back to Manchester United in the summer, then picked up an injury which ruled him out for a bit as well. He's not back to fitness, but he is finding his chances limited at Old Trafford right now. I think in an ideal world, Ahmed would like to go out on loan before the window closes, and he has previously admitted if he was to leave, he would like to go to Sunderland. But seems right now Manchester United aren't willing to play ball. They want to keep him around the squad. They've obviously let quite a few players leave already this month, fringe players, so they don't want to leave themselves short as well. But yeah, if they could get Ahmed back, it would be a brilliant signing for Sunderland. He's loved by the fans, and obviously Ahmed Diallo loved his time on Wearside as well. So it would tick a lot of boxes, but getting that deal agreed with Manchester United looks like it's going to be an issue as well. So it does look like Sunderland doing some business in and out right now, right up until the deadline. Alex Pritchard on his way to Birmingham City.
Saw that.
Which is a blow because obviously he's been a good player for Sunderland, but he's going to St Andrews to link up with the old Sunderland manager, Tony Mowbray. So he'll be hoping he can get the best out of him there as well. But yeah, he'll be a loss to Sunderland as well. But they are bringing in a young, exciting English winger, Romain Mundil from Standard Liège. Was at Tottenham as a kid before moving to Belgium. Very highly rated, played at England youth level as well. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets on working under Michael Beale at the Stadium of Light as well. But he's an exciting player and one that the fans can be excited about. But yeah, still in that market, Sunderland, for further reinforcements if they can find that striker.
And, we had Lee Darnborough on from Hull City last week, and they've made another really, really positive sign, who was one of the best players in his position in the Championship last year, right?
Yeah, a real good signing in Ryan Giles, just to go off the back of the Fabio Carvalho deal that they got from Liverpool at the start of the window. It makes Hull definitely a better team, I think, having Giles in there. He's got great experience at Championship level. I think he's had quite a few loan spells during his time at Wolves. Excelled at Cardiff, did really well at Middlesbrough as well, and obviously now he went to Luton in the summer. But again, he's found it hard to break into Rob Edwards' side, so they've allowed him to go out on loan to Hull. There's quite a few clubs who are interested in Giles as well, because he's got a lovely left foot. He's got a great assist record. I think at one point when he was at Cardiff, I think he had 10 assists in the opening half of the season. That's ended up saw him moving elsewhere. But yeah, Hull building a really good little squad there, and they have two players there who will really help in their push for promotion, I think. So yeah, Hull could be dark horses maybe for promotion back to the Premier League.
Yeah, I think so. Let's talk about West Ham in the Premier League. West Ham, they did Calvin Phillips earlier on in the week. What do you think about the Calvin Phillips deal? Is that right for all parties?
Yeah, I think it's a good deal for everybody involved. Obviously, David Moyes is a huge admirer of Calvin Phillips. Tried to sign him before he even went to Manchester City when he was still at Leeds, and David Moyes has continued to keep tabs on him as well. So I think that will definitely help Calvin Phillips going to join West Ham, and having a manager who's got his full backing and his full faith in him as well. Obviously, it was hard to turn down a move to Manchester City when he did leave Leeds, but the move just didn't work out. He wasn't a Pep Guardiola style of player at all, and Pep was quite open about that as well. Maybe sometimes a bit too harsh on Calvin, in my opinion. I think if he had got a run in the team, we might have seen the best of Calvin Phillips. But yeah, it didn't work out. He's had to go and look for first team football right now, because he's got the Euros to think about with England coming this summer. So he needs to be playing. He needs to be catching the eye of Gareth Southgate if he wants to be a starter in that team alongside Declan Rice. But I think great signing for West Ham. They're going to have a hungry, determined player hoping to prove a point. And as I said, I think it definitely makes that West Ham side stronger. And look at that midfield now. West Ham have got, they lost Declan Rice in summer, but now they've got Calvin Phillips, James Ward-Prowse, Thomas Souček still there, and also Edson Alvarez. So loads of options for David Moyes now to work with.
Oh yeah, I think well, hopefully he'll play, you know, lots of games for the rest of the season and maybe put himself in the frame for England. You know, it's a tough ask, but it wouldn't have happened had he just remained at City. That's for sure. And Ben Rama, is he moving? Ben Rama?
Yeah, it looks like Said Ben Rama is leaving West Ham before the close of the transfer window. He's in talks with Lyon over a loan deal with an option to join in a permanent basis in the summer. Ben Rama, he's shown flashes of what he can do, but probably not seen enough of it in a West Ham shirt. Obviously, the West Ham fans have been a bit frustrated with him of late, and David Moyes hasn't given him too many outings in the starting 11 as well. But I think going to France will be a good move for him as well. He's going to a Lyon team who are struggling right now down the wrong end of Ligue 1, so they'll be expecting him to come in and have a major impact. But yeah, it frees up space in that West Ham squad now for maybe David Moyes to make a late move in the window, because he has been looking for a wide forward, wide attacker. So now Ben Rama looks like he's out the door. It will give West Ham a bit of leeway to maybe bring in a new signing before tomorrow night's deadline.
Okay, good. And Brighton, let's talk about Brighton, because it's one of those clubs that, you know, with Brentford, I suppose they're not the developing clubs, the clubs that have not been in the Premier League for too long, but they've got a tremendous record on signing players. You know, some of the signings that they've done, and I mentioned Dan Ashworth being there back, you know, a couple of years ago, and they're still sort of bearing fruit from his work. But Brighton, what have Brighton done in this window, Peter?
Yeah, I think Brighton probably one of the most well-run clubs, most slick operators in the transfer windows these days. They haven't done a great deal of business. They have done one big piece of business, which is the Argentine Valentin Barco from Boca Juniors. Very highly rated young player, can play as a left back or further up as a left-sided midfielder as well. A lot of clubs were looking at Barco. Manchester City were even considering signing him as well. So for Brighton to get that deal done, I think is a really positive signing for them. He's I think a player who's got huge potential, and obviously we've seen the success that Brighton have had in the South American market over the last few years as well, with the likes of Moises Caicedo, Alexis McAllister, all coming from South America and becoming key players in that Brighton team, and then going on to secure big money moves to other clubs as well. So it's a model that works for Brighton. They'll identify the talent, give them that opportunity in the Premier League, and if they do receive a suitable offer, a big offer on their terms, they will let them move on. They won't stand in the way, because that's the way they do it. They'll bring the player in for a small fee and probably sell him on for a huge profit. And it's definitely smart business by Brighton, who for me are one of probably the best operators in Europe right now.
And this, for me, they seem to have got they must have some good scouts in the South American marketplace, because they seem to, like you say, use that pipeline coming direct from South America to the English game. And they seem to fit them into the team very, very quickly. I know Moises Caicedo had to have a loan move first, but, you know, they seem to have got it quite, you know, they've got a good thing going there with South American players direct into the Premier League. And I think, you know, that's there's not many clubs who are bringing South Americans across directly.
No, I think a lot of teams are now following Brighton's lead and trying to tap into that South American market. You can see now clubs have specific scouts in Brazil, in Argentina, in Uruguay, and everything else, just to try and identify that next top player, because of the success that Brighton have had. And look at the money that is brought into Brighton, signing the likes of Caicedo for nominal fees and then selling them for over £100 million. What business that was by Brighton. And they just keep finding these top young players as well. And Ciso, who is currently injured at the minute. He's been a big miss for Brighton, but he was outstanding for them last year as well. And I'm sure Barco will have a very good career at Brighton as well. And I expect he might see it as a stepping stone in the future to maybe a bigger club as well. And Brighton have got no problem with that at all. They see that as a way to make huge profits and to offer players that pathway to play regular first team football in the Premier League at a high level.
Just before we wrap up, let's talk about spending to survive. I've called it the topic. So we're looking at the Premier League, the likes of Luton. Are Everton spending to survive? I don't know. I think there's still some way to go in there. Whether it will be 10 points or whatever, there's an appeal. Sheffield United have certainly spent a bit of money, Pete. And what about Burnley as well? So do you think those clubs will spend to survive or have spent to survive?
I think they have spent to survive. Burnley spent quite heavily in the summer for players. Vincent Kompany did bring in a lot of new faces following their promotion to the Premier League. Again, it's debatable whether those signings have been a success or not. Obviously brought in Fofana from Chelsea as the striker on loan in this window to try and help them score some goals and boost their chances of staying in the Premier League right now as well. Sheffield United, it's been a bit difficult for them. They lost a couple of key players in the summer transfer window, losing Sander Berge and Ilian and Dye, which were big losses to Sheffield United, and especially to Paul Heckingbottom, the manager. To lose two of your best players in the summer transfer window was a huge blow. I don't think there'll be much money for Chris Wilder to spend in this window. He's obviously brought in Ben Brereton Diaz on loan from Villarreal, which looks a good signing. He's brought in the goalkeeper Grubic, who we've mentioned earlier in the show, to come in and try and boost the goalkeeping options. He's desperate for a centre half. He's trying to bring in that, but again, right now that probably looks like a loan with maybe an option. The problem is when you're at the wrong end of the table, how can you go out and spend big? Because in the back of your mind, there's worry then if we get relegated, we've got players on huge wages that we've signed in that January transfer window, and then they don't want to be here when we're relegated to the Championship. And we've seen clubs get themselves in all sorts of trouble over the years trying to buy their way out of trouble. Leeds did it a few years ago when they tumbled down the leagues. We've seen what's happened to the likes of Portsmouth, Sunderland, Sheffield Wednesday when they've tried to buy their way to survival. It's ended up costing the club big time. They've even dropped not just one league but two leagues.
You know, and Pete, as an agent, your players going to a club that are already struggling, you know, at the wrong end of the table, they're getting beat more often than not. There's a potential that they'll, you know, be in the Championship next season. So it's not an easy sell, is it, for Chris Wilder or whoever else? I think the story that seems to be emerging is Luton Town, though, that, you know, that some of the players that they've acquired, they've hardly paid any fees out. You know, they've got some really good players in the building. I mean, I've always liked Elijah Adebayo, and I'm not saying that after his hat trick. You know, I recommended him to a couple of clubs in the Championship before he went to Luton. When he was he was released from Fulham and went to Walsall, and he wasn't the finished article at Walsall, that's for sure, and probably still isn't the finished article. But he's in the Premier League and he's scoring goals. They could be the story of this season, Luton, if they do manage to stay up.
Yeah, brilliant story if they could go and stay up. No one expected to be in the Premier League. Never mind to be fighting to stay up in it right now as well. But yeah, as you said, there is gems you can find. If you do look down the lower leagues, Adebayo, who, as you said, got released by Fulham, was down playing in 8th tier of football at one point as well. But now he's scoring hat-tricks in the Premier League, and he's a handful. If you ask any defender, they won't want to face him. He's such a big, tall, powerful striker. He's going to give you a real hard game for 90 minutes as well. And that's the mentality at Luton. Yeah, the mentality at Luton is they will fight for every single point, and that will go a long way to maybe ensuring that they stay in the Premier League. And you might see a bigger club dropping into that bottom three and end up getting relegated. So fair play to Luton and the recruitment team. And obviously they've got players there hungry to make an impression in the Premier League.
And Rob Edwards is doing a great job, and he might attract, you know, bigger fish in terms of the pecking order of head coaches. And I know Mick Harford there is a central figure in the club, and his recruitment has been terrific. What about the bottom of the Championship, Pete? We've got the likes of QPR, Sheffield Wednesday, Rotherham. I mean, Rotherham, I really like Rotherham as a club. You know, they've got a small budget. They tend to be yo-yoing between the Championship and League One, but they're a very well-run club. Rob Scott has just been made director of football down there. What do you think about the bottom of the Championship? What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's going to be a real fight to the end, I think, to see who does end up suffering relegation from the Championship. Rotherham, they've got their work cut out. There's no doubts about that. Liam Richardson's obviously come in as manager, and he's definitely seen an improvement in some of the performances, maybe not the results just yet as well. They'll be busy, I think, in the final 36 hours of the window. I think he's looking at centre-back, central midfielder and a striker if he can, but trying to persuade those players to come down and get involved in a relegation battle is quite hard as well. Sheffield Wednesday, I think they've definitely improved under Danny Roll. I think he's done a decent job so far as well. They'll be looking to add some new faces just to freshen things up as well. And then we've seen the latest managerial casualty in the Championship this week with Darren Moore losing his job at Huddersfield. They're in the bottom 4 right now as well. So the club felt they needed to act and replace him. So it'll be interesting to see who they go for, because they've obviously spent a bit of money in this window as well with a few new signings, which nobody expected at all. All the word was that Huddersfield had no money to spend, but Kevin Nagle, the owner, has put his hand in his pocket, and they have gone and signed some new players, and now he's going to have to go find a new manager as well to ensure that they stay up.
Yeah, I'm just wondering whether it hasn't been announced yet, but I wonder whether they'll go for an old-fashioned keep them up type of, renter, the old manager who has got the record of guaranteeing sort of safety type of thing, and whether it's that, we'll just have to see. In Scotland, I noticed Aberdeen had slipped down the table as well, and they sacked Barry Robson today. What about Scotland? I think it's Motherwell, St Johnstone, Ross County, and Livingston towards the bottom. They'll be just talking about loan players, and it's always very difficult down the bottom of the SPL.
Yeah, it's difficult because of the budgets that you're working within to attract players to go there. Livingston do look in real trouble, and they could fall through that trapdoor this season. Been really disappointing season for David Martindale's side. But yeah, Aberdeen, probably the big surprise story that they've struggled so badly this year. Obviously, they got to the League Cup final, only to lose to Rangers, but now they're on the search for a new manager following Barry Robson's departure as well. So whoever comes in there will be expected to transform their fortunes and get them up that table away from that relegation dogfight. But it's tough in Scotland. The finances aren't there as they are in England. Even Championship clubs would have bigger budgets than the majority of the Scottish clubs right now as well. So trying to compete with those for players makes it even harder to try and sign players. But I'm sure some of those clubs will be looking at maybe loan deals from clubs in England, from Premier League clubs and Championship, to try and bolster their squads before the 12 p.m. deadline in Scotland on Thursday night.
It's a 12 p.m. deadline in Scotland, is it? 12
Get that extra hour to get that player done.
So when a deal's followed down in England, just drive up the road a little bit further. It'll take more than an hour to get up to some of the clubs in Scotland, that's for sure. Pete, what's your day looking like tomorrow? Are you just right across everything from what time are you getting up tomorrow? Because it's quite an exciting day for us in the industry. I mean, I've had a couple of deadline day transfers, but one that really stuck in the mind was it was only on. It'd been talked about a lot during the window, but it was only a sort of real possibility at about 9:30 on transfer deadline day. And it was for a London club, and I'm based in Newcastle. So I started driving towards London thinking there's a deal going to happen here. And I kept stopping at service stations and making calls, and because I was thinking it could potentially be off and I could just drive straight back. I ended up just outside a training ground in North London. I won't mention the club or the player. At Premier League training ground, and it was about 8:30 by the time I ended up there. I got into the club at 9, and we did the deal at about 10:30, and it was like touch and go to get the paperwork because it was all being faxed back in the day. It was a fax machine thing, but it was a real exhilarating day for me. And driving back up from London to Newcastle at sort of 12 o'clock at night, having done a last-minute deal for a Premier League player was a real buzz. But it was such a stressful day. I needed a week off after it, to be honest. So, but I'm not expecting to be busy. I think you never know with these things, because that deal happened from the back of a conversation that had been going on for a few months, but I hadn't heard anything for two or 3 weeks, and it just came out of the blue. So I wasn't really expecting it. And let's just fingers crossed that happens again tomorrow. But Pete, you're going to be right across everything. I know I've been watching you on Twitter, and you're getting all the stories. Is there any particular one that you think, do you know what, there might just be a big transfer?
Yeah, I think there will. There's always something that crops up on deadline day, Tony. As you said, clubs are going through their lists and they're not getting some of their top targets. They keep moving down that list to a player who they could potentially sign. So I think there will be a bit of movement. I think West Ham will have to do something now. Ben Rama's going out the door, so they'll be active. I still think we might see a bit of movement at Wolves for a striker and potentially Fulham for a striker as well. I don't think any of the big boys will be making any moves. They'll keep their powder dry until the summer. But yeah, there'll be a bit of movement. And yeah, as you said, deadline day, maybe not as exciting as years gone by because of clubs not spending as much as previous years. But yeah, it'll still be an exciting day. And I'm sure there'll be movement in and out from clubs up and down the country.
Thanks. Thank you, Pete. Thanks for that. And good luck tomorrow. So that wraps it up for today's session. We are back next Wednesday where we're going to review. Hopefully there's something to review tomorrow. We're going to review the transfer window, talk a little bit about the trends and how what the clubs have been doing. So we hope to see you next Wednesday, same time, 1 o'clock for this FTF Marketplace. Thanks, Pete, and thank you for watching.